The following program is for informational and educational purposes only and is not to be considered legal advice. Fraudsters Radio was created to expose the many scams and frauds that have so infected society today. Scammers, fraudsters, and rip-off artists abound, whether it's scamming homeowners with bogus foreclosure relief services, dating fraud, incompetent lawyers, or consumer rip-offs. It's high time the public has a voice. If you work in a profession that deals with fraud, or if you believe you were or are a victim of fraud, you now have a radio listening public that wants to hear from you. Please feel free to message us through our Fraudsters Radio Facebook page, and we may have you on the show as a guest. If you'd like to call in for today's show, the number is 646-668-8512.
And welcome to Fraudsters Radio. I'm Lori Z, nationally syndicated radio host and consumer advocate. And my co-host, Storm Bradford, will be joining us next week. In about 15 minutes, we're going to have a special guest, Shoshanah Posner from NoFraud.com, calling in, so we can do our fraud thing for you today. But before we start, I was speaking with Jason here at the station about a situation with me where I was actually cyberbullied on the website next door. But Jason, you were telling me a really, really horrible story that puts my story to shame. So would you share yours? Because yours frightened me.
Yeah, so I have a radio show that I do every week. It's called the Amy Radio Show. And I bring on celebrities and different types of people that are interested in the arts and passionate about what they do. And I had gotten this request to have Samantha Markle on. And the name didn't hit me at first, but she comes with a lot of trolling. And anybody that knows trolling, that's people that go on social media and start attacking other people and, calling nasty things and stuff like that. I'm like, that's just bullies. I've been bullied my whole life. No big deal. So I bring her on,
okay.
And then I realize that she is the sister to Meghan Markle, the Duchess that married Prince Harry. And
okay.
So the interview was about fake news, and it was also about MS, because she suffers from MS like I do. So anyways, her publicist put out that she was going to be on the show, and I was actually at Disney World, and I got this. I got a thing on Twitter, and it says, if you dare post this, if you dare air the interview with Meghan Markle, with Samantha Markle, this will be the last thing you've ever done. And I was like, wow, it's starting to happen. And I said and I just looked around. I had friends around me. I was like, I was scared. I was scared to death. When you get death threats like that. So I just tried to play off and everything else. And then I started talking to the lady there, her publicist, and she goes, yeah, it's called the Megulators. And what this group is, it's a group that's joined up because they're trying to protect Meghan Markle from being kicked out of the monarchy. Now, she's not a princess. She can't be a princess. She was born and raised here in the United States. She can only be a duchess. So even these Megulators don't know what they're talking about because they call her the true princess. She's not a princess. And anyways, there's a lot of stuff about her that technically she has done some things that the government has pretty much suppressed, so that way she could be a duchess, because technically if this stuff came out, she wouldn't be allowed to be a duchess. So they decided to attack me because they thought Samantha was going to attack her, because I guess the Inquirer had run some type of stupid story about Samantha that she got in an argument with Meghan, and so there was a family rift. That was never the truth. And so they took me as she was going to get on here and spill all this rumors about Meghan. So they decided to silence me. And at first they didn't think anything of it, because they're like, oh, he's just a little podcast. He doesn't have any.
Right.
It's not a big deal. But they didn't realize the people I had on my show. When they saw the people that I had on my show, they not only continued to threaten me with death threats, they decided to hack my site, my website scheduling ability, so it would stop that show from coming out. They broke up all the codes, so I had to physically go in there and rebuild the entire thing. They started hacking my phone. They started listening to my phone. They started deleting people off my phone. They went on my social media networks, and they started to, anybody that followed me, celebrity, whoever it was, they went ahead and started to attack them and deframe my character against them. They did cost me some money because I had to go ahead and rebuild this. The lady that was the publicist for Samantha lost speaking engagements. She was nominated for awards for her book that they now canceled it because of all the crap that was going on, and they just never really realized that they're like, they can't find out who it is because they'd use fake names on Twitter and all these other places, and they're all throughout the United States. Well, what they didn't realize is that when you go onto a server, it leaves an IP address. And I could tell you exactly the days that I was hacked. So what I did is I went through there and I found all these IP addresses that they came in on. We researched them, sent them to the FBI, and we unexposed them. So now we knew who they were. This group was considered a cyber terrorist attack, a cyber terrorist group. And the FBI couldn't do anything because there's no laws against it. It just looked upon, badly. Now, if they had physically come out and hurt me, that's something they could do. The problem with them hacking the site is they can't. It's international, so it's not like they can do much to them. So we have to get the other people involved, which they don't want anything to do with it. So, that put us in a really nasty situation. And unfortunately, with cyberbullying laws, there's not much that they can do about it. They're trying to change that. But, my site was hacked. Everything was wiped out. My social media was screwed over. And I was just trying to rebuild. And this went in all the way in from November until January when we exposed all the people. And then they broke up because they realized how much trouble they could have been in. Because we could still go after them, and if they're here in the United States, we can prosecute them. And they're looking at all kinds of major problems. They went into some of the people's bank accounts and wiped out their bank accounts. They did some pretty bad things. You're pretty computer illiterate though. So you can figure out a lot of the things that maybe a normal person like me, if that happened, I wouldn't be able to necessarily figure all of that out. But I think the scary part. Is the fact that these people, if you're threatened online, unless you personally know the person, there's very little that you can really do about it unless you have some I don't know. I guess it depends because compared to yours, mine took place on the website next door. There was a consignment store that had closed up in August of last year and kept everybody's stuff, including mine. And I had some friends that lost thousands of dollars worth of stuff. I think somebody had posted on Nextdoor, and then I posted, and then all of a sudden, 3 guys jumped in and attacked me verbally. Now, these are within the surrounding neighborhoods of where I live, so I don't know them personally, but I was new to Nextdoor, and I hadn't researched enough. I got caught up in the moment. I'm thinking, I'm just trying to help these people, because I am the Fraudsters Radio co-host and I know a little bit, and I'm the one who called the detectives, called the attorneys, tried to get these people help, try to get my own stuff back and so forth. And so the women that saw the postings who had lost stuff jumped in to defend me, and I still have a lot of those original messages, but miraculously, I guess after a week, suddenly these 3 guys had disappeared. So either they removed themselves or someone reported them. Now, months have gone by. I got my stuff back. I hope other people got their stuff back. But throughout the last few months, this same guy and another fella, they'll put up posts that reference back to me. And I can tell because it'll say, that babbling idiot who put stuff up on, who went to who's on the news stations. That was me. I went to the news stations. I got help for these people. I try to do my best to help others. That's what I do. And so when I saw this last post, I said, I've had it. And so then I reported him not only to the corporate office, but to the person that moderates the group. And I said, you're welcome to go through my messages. I go, but this is cyberbullying, and I'm the co-host of Fraudsters Radio. So I think that was enough that they actually removed the guy right now. But see, same thing could happen to either you or I again, because guess what? These people are just going to make up new fake names and addresses somewhere in the complex, and they're going to do the same thing eventually. And that's the part that disturbs me, because I sit here and I go, wow, it would be real easy for this guy to find my address and come to my house. Thank God I am alarmed. But, for you actually have death threats where you'd be like looking over your shoulder all the time. what's really bad about cyberbullying is that they can use what they call it. The internet is literally they call it an iron curtain, because you can do so much behind it. Nobody can see you. It's almost impossible to penetrate. But if you're getting attacked, there's not a heck of a lot you can do to retaliate with it. And they can use that ability of staying anonymous and, like you said, changing different screen names. And so if they get banned, no big deal. They just go to another one. The only way that could technically be stopped is if Twitter or social or Facebook or any of these other places physically ban the IP address, which is virtually impossible to get. So that and it's also a fine line, because sometimes these IP addresses can be used over a network. Like, let's just say Verizon in or Frontier here, and let's just say the Tampa Bay area. That there may be a string of IP addresses. So if you get rid of the entire, like 3/4 of that string, nobody can access that particular website. So there's a big problem that you run into with stuff like that. They can't just blanket some of these things. So that's the biggest problem that you have, and without being able to get at least that IP address for these people, it's almost impossible to find out who it is.
Yeah, and that's disturbing. I mean, it's just like the robocalls, where they have the equipment that changes the phone numbers, and you call back the number that robocall or that where somebody calls you, and it's a real number, but they're just using somebody's number to make the calls. So I don't know how regulators would regulate certain things. With phone companies, I would think it would be easier, but with the internet protocol, I don't know enough about that. I know, like, don't they have like IP proxies, things where you could actually hide that internet address? I don't know a lot, but I know a little. So can't they hide it, and that's why it's so hard? And is there any way for the FBI to track them down if they do that?
They can, but the thing that you got to do is you got to be able to go ahead and document exactly the day and time that it happens, because they can go back and it does give you a log, but it does erase itself over time. So for them to be able to do something serious and look into that, you have to act on it right away. Now the problem with it is that most of the local state authorities, police officers and stuff like that, will not touch it. So you literally have to take it to the FBI, and when you go to the FBI, you have to have a substantial case for them to make a case for it, because it's expensive for the FBI to get involved. So what I found out is, even though they did death threats to me, unless they physically show up to my door, show up at my work, or I can actually prove that they were somewhere in my vicinity, it's simply a threat, and there's nothing that could be done about it.
They'll do about it.
So,
yeah. That's
and that was
sad,
from the FBI themselves.
Yeah, because it's like putting up the stop sign after somebody got killed. It's a little bit too late. We've had the FBI on the show before, and they've said that they're so overwhelmed with the amount of crime that they have to deal with that I guess they have to pick and choose their cases. But I don't know. Listen, I'm a northerner, and if I'm from New York Metro, Florida to me is like a whole other country where people just pass off, and maybe that's unfair to say, but I can tell you situations where, like with the consignment store, it should have been a criminal case, but they don't want to deal with it, so they just pass it off as a civil case, even though it was really a criminal case. And I hear lots of stories from people down here where criminal things happen and they can't get anybody to help, and that's the part that I find disturbing. So now, are there ways for you to protect yourself from this happening again, or not really?
Not really. Unfortunately, you're at the mercy of somebody else, because if you block a computer, they can go to another computer, they can go to a cell phone, they can go to a tablet. Now, there is a little bit different scenarios when it involves kids, because you see a lot of kids that are getting cyberbullied. Some of them even commit suicide because they're bullied so badly. Yes. And that's the problem with the social media has opened up for these kids. The kids just live on social media, and they know that they can bully. And in the past, they could bully these people and get away with it. And then, unfortunately, it's infectious. So when one person sees somebody picking on, another kid will join in, even if they don't know why they're picking on them. They're just doing it. So that's where it grows to be a problem. But if you go to the school, if your kid's being bullied, first of all, you should monitor your children if they are on social media, even if they're in high school. Just kind of see it, and if their personality starts to change, and something might not be right. So this is where you got to be a little bit more proactive and start talking to them, because you won't see that unless they post it like on comments or something like that. But if they're doing it in their messenger, unless you're on their phone or tablet to see their messenger, you'll never notice it. So just kind of like look at stuff, and if there is something like that, try to talk to your children. And then you can go to the principal, and a lot of the times the people that are cyberbullying through social media can be prosecuted because they are underage. It is a big problem. The local police will pick that up faster. And I've seen a lot of kids that were either expelled from school or they were completely thrown in jail, depending on how bad it got to. Because the problem with that is that they're still surrounded by their peers. So if they start to see people cyberbullying online, sometimes that transcends into the actual classroom. And this is where kids are getting beat up to the point of sometimes, going to the hospital. So, it's a little bit different that way.
It's terrible. And we have to go to a break. Before we do, I'll just tell you real quick. A few years ago, I did a show on this where I spoke with the mother of a young girl who was like 12 years old, and some boy convinced her to send her topless photos, and he shared them all over everywhere, and the girl ended up killing herself, and it was horrible. And all I could think of is, oh my God, what is just the whole world is gone. I'm going to do a show called what in the world's gone wrong, because it just seems like everything's gone wrong. But I know I have to invite you to my Facebook page. You'll probably laugh, but some of the postings I put up are probably shockers to people. Let's do this. Let's go to a commercial break, and let's see if our guest is on the line when we come back, because I'm looking forward to having her on too. And you're welcome to stay on with us if you'd like. Okay, so let's go to a quick break.
Okay.
Have you received a notice of foreclosure on your property? Do you suspect that you're involved in an unfair or fraudulent loan agreement? Are you looking for a way to save your home? Would you like to cut through all the misinformation and find out what really works? Would you like to learn strategies that the so-called gurus aren't aware of? If you answered yes to any of those questions, a professional team at Mortgage Fraud Examiners can assist you and your attorney with all of these things and more. Contract breaches, errors, statutory regulatory violations, fraudulent appraisals, and other fraudulent conduct cause most mortgages to be legally problematic. In fact, the Federal Deposit Insurance Corporation found that nearly 2,000 financial institutions they assessed received citations for significant compliance violations. They also examined appraisals and found out that of the 259 appraisals reviewed for accuracy, only 7 fully complied with professional standards. Call us at 844-920-7200. That's 844-920-7200. Mortgage Fraud Examiners, 844-920-7200.
And welcome back to Fraudsters Radio. If you have a question, you can call in to 646-668-8512. And now my special guest today is Shoshanah Posner. Am I pronouncing your last name correct, Shoshanah?
It's Posner.
Posner, okay. And you're from NoFraud.com. I like that name because, the show obviously is Fraudsters Radio. Can you talk a little bit about how you got in, what got you into NoFraud.com, working for the company? How did you end up doing what you do?
Sure. So NoFraud.com was actually founded by my husband, so nepotism at its finest over here.
Okay.
So he was the director of e-commerce at an online electronics store. They sold generally like small electronics, Bluetooths and chargers, back in the day when Bluetooths were still cool. And they started getting into tablets, and they did that during holiday season. And once the holiday season was over, they were so excited. They had sold thousands of tablets, and then the chargebacks started rolling in, and they didn't even realize how vulnerable they were to fraud until it happened to them. So they went around looking for a solution that can help protect the company against online fraud. There were a couple of solutions back then, definitely less than there were today, and they didn't find a solution that they thought was exactly what they needed. So he went and built his own, and it was so successful he realized he's not the only one looking for a solution to stop fraud chargebacks. So he started marketing it, and I got involved, and now I do the business development and sales for NoFraud. Several years later. That's awesome, because that's what the show is all about is fraud, how to prevent fraud, what to do if fraud has happened to you. But I think your company is very interesting in what it does, because I can tell you, I've had friends who've owned businesses. I've owned a business where you take merchant cards and things like that. And it's so rampant. And I can tell you, I myself, as a victim of identity theft, had my purse stolen back in 2010. And to this day, my credit cards,
they both know what happened, obviously, because I had to fill out affidavits, but they will every so often send me a new card and go, we found what we believe is fraud on your account. We're sending you a new card. Like, they don't even wait for me to call or get the statement. So I guess they do have some way of flagging, some of the fraudulent stuff. Now, when you have wrote that great article I saw for Entrepreneur Magazine that you had sent over, so we're going to talk about a bunch of stuff from that article, and then also one of the things I want to cover, because I know it's more to deal with your company, but maybe you can kind of explain in layman's terms when we get to the part where you talk about like device identification, geolocation. I'm looking here, proxy piercing. Like, these are all things that I really don't know a lot about, but I'm hoping, as you make the public aware of the different things that could happen, your company can obviously help people. You can help people. So talk a little bit first about classic fraud.
Sure. Maybe we can start off with a little bit of a history of how does fraud happen? How is your card stolen, and how did someone get a hold of your card? So the short answer is, the biggest way that fraudsters get a hold of their victims' identities, either identities or credit card credentials, is through the data breaches. There have been thousands of data breaches, unfortunately, and not all of them as public as the Target one or the Starwood one, but there have been so many data breaches that happen, unfortunately, every single day, and different data is collected every time. So sometimes the data is collected that helps unfortunately, to get the to build identities, to essentially start stealing a person's identity. It really depends on what it is that they steal. The mother lode is always the credit card numbers and security codes, billing addresses. This data is available very, very easily on the dark web. The dark web is, people refer to it all the time. It's essentially a big website where criminals go to exchange ideas, buy and sell stolen credentials. It's pretty amazing. Some of the fraudsters will even sell little lessons on how to protect yourself against companies like us. Tips and tricks on how not to trip up the fraud solutions.
My God!
And they'll even use marketing techniques to describe the quality of the cards that they're selling. We've tested it already, and we know that these cards work. We guarantee 80% success rate on these cards. Like, it's pretty wild how sophisticated the fraudsters.
It's like a selling pitch. It's like a selling pitch for criminals.
Yeah, it's very unfortunate. But the dark web is monitored by fraud fighters like us, so we're aware of what goes on, and that of course helps us be able to stay one step ahead of the fraudsters. So a data breach occurs. The criminals will usually, they don't dump all the data on at the same time. They'll usually wait a little bit and put it out in little packets to see who wants to buy the card information. And it's also pretty wild that sometimes the credit card information with the associated billing address is only 2 cents more than a credit card without the billing information. So a lot of times companies think, they got the billing address correct. Even if the shipping is somewhere else, it's fine, because how could the fraudster know where the billing address is? So something to just realize, it's not very expensive to get a card with the billing address. So the fraudster essentially gets hold of these cards, and then they start going to town and start shopping with these cards, and that is how the cards get into the hands of the fraudsters in the first place.
Maybe this is a silly question for you, but I'm sitting here thinking, when I make a check deposit to my bank now, it has the option where you can do your fingerprint right from the phone. Credit cards, went to magnetic strips, and then they went to chips, but the criminals are always one step ahead. Do you think there'll ever be is there a fingerprint type of credit card or way to do it? Or because it seems like there's always some way for the criminals to find a way around whatever the good guys are doing.
So biometric information is essentially what you're describing, is used right now, used by government facilities, but it generally is shied upon. People don't like to put their fingerprint in to buy, a table online or a couch or, a piece or a T-shirt.
Yeah.
So the online businesses are always struggling between giving the ideal experience to their customers while keeping fraud at bay. The more you make it hard for customers to check out, you're going to have a high card abandonment rate, which is obviously money, just evaporating in front of your eyes. So online businesses have to really walk that very fine line between making my checkout experience as frictionless as possible while keeping fraud at bay. Asking for somebody to put a thumbprint in is probably not going to be good for a company's, a company's checkout experience that they're providing to their clients.
Right, because the criminals won't want to put their fingerprints on their own actual cards. You think of it as a protection mechanism, but then people are going to go, oh, well, I was arrested. I don't want to give my fingerprints up, or maybe they're licensed in something. They don't want to give their fingerprints up. But it just seems like it's so difficult to handle the amount of fraud that processes. I mean, I don't know what percentage of, I'm looking at your article. It says, according to a recent Javelin study, $16 billion was lost to fraud last year. That's such a humongous amount of money, and that explains why products here cost so much more money, because of all the fraud. Somebody's got to pay for it, so we're all paying for it, right?
Yeah, that's exactly it, and it's so unfortunate, but that's just the way, the nature of e-commerce right now. And I know you mentioned something about the credit card companies, trying their best to stop fraud, and they definitely help prevent some of the fraud. I'd love to say they can prevent all of it. Obviously they can't, which is why companies like No Fraud exist. But I know from a personal experience, I was in Florida, and my husband was desperate to buy a smoker. He was researching. Finally he just bit the bullet. He's like, you know what, we're going to do it. So he used our American Express card, and he bought a Cabela smoker. And we actually got a fraud alert on our phone because we live in New York.
Right.
So the credit card company realized that somebody's buying an expensive item. Typically, we haven't shopped ever at that store. It's several $100s. So that tripped their fraud system. So, of course, we said, yes, it's us, and that was okay. But that, the credit card companies do try to prevent fraud, but it gets very, it's very complicated, and the fraudsters have lots of time on their hands. So it's, essentially, the credit card companies and companies like us, and the businesses themselves, everyone really tries their best to prevent credit card fraud.
Right, and it's funny because I'm a New York Metro girl myself, living down here in Florida since 2005, and the amount of fraud. I had a family member from New York City visit me a few years ago, just a one-day trip in and out, and by the time she got home, someone had already compromised, I think it was her bank card or debit card information. Now, all she did was come in, my other half picked her up at the airport, family member, went to one place for the day, dropped her back off at the airport, and by the next day, her debit card numbers had been compromised, and it was from the town that we were actually in. And I'm sitting here going, how could that happen? I don't know.
I can give you a hint.
Go ahead. Go. Give me one.
Okay, sure. So this doesn't apply to credit card fraud, and it's interesting you're mentioning Miami because I'll go on a tangent over there. But it's very possible that she swiped her card at a gas station or wherever. Some of the criminals have credit card readers. Like they will essentially put in some software that can pull out the credit card information from the card, and they'll use that information to commit further crime. So I think it's called a skimmer. So it's very possible that that's how they got her credit card, her information in the first place. But interesting that you're saying Florida in general is a hotbed for crime. It happens to be that there is a lot of fraud that comes out of Florida, and that's because Florida's on the coast. This is one of the reasons why Florida is on the coast, and there are many international criminals that want to get products, and many U.S. companies don't ship internationally. So what they'll do is they will order a product and send it to something called a freight forwarding company. So the product is going to somewhere in the U.S., and that freight forwarding company will simply take the product and ship it to any country that that the fraudster wants to ship the product to. So that way the fraudsters can get product from companies that don't ship internationally. Some companies do ship internationally, but those transactions are scrutinized more heavily. So they'll simply ship it to a freight forwarding company in Florida, and this also goes for Oregon. It goes for, there's a bunch in Delaware, a lot along the border, like the Mexican border as well, similar types of industries or businesses called freight forwarding companies. And they will simply ship to these freight forwarding companies so that those transactions aren't scrutinized as heavily. So, Florida is a hotbed for that type of fraud.
Yep. I mean, I get so many people down here that tell me such horrible stories. It's scary. I should have stayed up in the New York metro area. That's what I think. Well, let's do this. I want to go to a commercial break, so stay with us. We're going to be back in just a moment, and we're going to talk more about the e-commerce fraud schemes. So stay with us. We'll be right back.
There is a very high likelihood your mortgage contains an extensive error. At Mortgage Fraud Examiners, we know just how costly a missed opportunity can be. For almost 40 years, we have consulted, retained, and referred to by attorneys, lawyers, trial practitioners throughout the nation. Put another way, we are the trusted source for litigation support. A foreclosure is basically an allegation the homeowner breached the contract by failing to make timely payments. The contract is clear. The borrower promised they would make timely payments, and if they didn't, the lender could take the property. The only way to overcome the homeowner's breach is to show the lender breached first, identify errors that would void the contract, identify regulatory violations, identify appraisal fraud and other fraudulent conduct, and the only way to find these wrongs is to thoroughly examine the whole mortgage transaction. This meticulous examination of your mortgage transaction and appraisal can identify legal defects that would make your mortgage unenforceable and entitle you to compensation or even free title to your property. Call us at 844-920-7200. Mortgage Fraud Examiners, that's 844-920-7200. 844-920-7200.
And welcome back to Fraudsters Radio. If you would like to call in, ask a question, 646-668-8512. I've got Shoshanah Posner from nofraud.com. And we've been talking about you're really a wealth of knowledge. Like, I've actually learned a lot from you in just a few minutes. E-commerce fraud schemes. Continue talking about some of the types of schemes that the bad guys do, because you've got a whole list in this article that you wrote.
Sure. So I guess the first one is classic fraud. We kind of touched upon this previously. This is the type of fraud that's committed generally by unsophisticated fraudsters. So kind of first-time beginners, they go online, they buy some stolen cards, or maybe they just work as a waiter and they snap the picture of a card that somebody put into that someone gave them to pay for their dinner, and they'll go online and they'll start purchasing goods. So this is very easy fraud to locate. Typically, these types of fraudsters will use internet proxies to hide their IP. A lot of this fraud originates internationally, so the goods will be shipped to reshippers, like I mentioned before, so freight forwarders or reshippers.
Okay.
And typically also these types of fraudsters will create a brand new email address because they don't want the fraud associated with their emails. So that's what the typical classic fraud looks like. This type of fraud is easy to catch. You just need to take a look at the IP address to see if it's a proxy. That always increases the risk of fraud. Take a look at the email quality and also see where the product's going. So that type of fraud is pretty basic. The next type of fraud is a really interesting type of fraud. It's called triangulation fraud. Now, this is the type of fraud where the fraudster will go to usually eBay, sometimes Amazon, and will sell a company's product. We have this issue with a company called Autopets. They sell this really fancy kitty litter product. It's fairly expensive, a couple $100s, and they kept noticing that their product was being sold on eBay for cheaper than they sold it or any of their authorized retailers are allowed to sell it for. So they did some digging and they realized that they've been a victim of triangulation fraud. So this is how it works. The fraudster creates a storefront on eBay. They sell the product for a nice chunk cheaper than what you will find it online. An unsuspecting shopper goes online and says, wow, this is a great price, so let me buy it. So they purchase the product. The fraudster will use stolen cards, go to the actual website, the Autopets website, will purchase the product and ship it directly to the customer, the unsuspecting customer that bought the product on eBay. So the fraudster doesn't even have to touch the product because the company is doing all the shipping for them. So it's called triangulation fraud because there are three parties involved. There's the fraudster, the unsuspecting shopper, and then there's the business that is being defrauded.
Gotcha.
And I have an interesting story, actually. I was speaking to a company that sells high-end menswear products. Like, I know they sell fancy shoe polish and hangers that make sure that your blazer doesn't get creased. So he had a really big issue with this type of fraud, and he got a chargeback, and he was so upset. He's like, I don't understand what's going on. The home looks like a nice house. Typically, fraudsters will, the unsophisticated fraudsters will ship to their houses that are generally not very, very expensive. So he said, I'm going to go and research what happened here because I don't understand how this is possible. It was in his neighborhood. So he got into his car, he drove to that address, knocks on the door, and says, hi, my name is, I'm not going to reveal the name, my name is, John Smith from this company. I'm curious to know, you bought our product and then you submitted a chargeback. What happened? So he's like, no, I didn't buy it from you. I bought it off eBay. And then he realized, that he has been a victim of triangulation fraud. So this, person was an unsuspecting shopper that thought they're getting a good deal when really they don't realize that they're buying stolen goods. So, usually when a price is too good to be true, it usually is. So there's very often some sort of fraud involved in getting good deals.
And it must be hard. I guess it's hard to find, because if the customer thinks it's real, then it's hard. What do you do? I guess in a case like that, once you with this customer, once he recognized that it was triangulation fraud, they're not really able to stop the company from doing it. Do they get reported to eBay or Amazon for doing that?
So they can, but it's very difficult to use the company's fraud prevention teams because the person will just change their identity and start a new store.
Yeah.
So as much as it can help in the short term, in the long term, it doesn't stop the problem. What we did with both of these companies is we just identified fraud from happening in the first place. So we were able to identify, this is not a good shopper, this is a fraudster. So he was not able to buy their product anymore. So I guess he had a couple of unfulfilled orders on eBay, and then he simply moved on to another store that wasn't protected.
Oh my gosh! I can't even imagine thinking the way that these people think because I'm total opposite of it. But that's interesting. Now tell me, what is I'm going to guess what this is. Interception fraud is on the list. Now, here's the thing, and I don't know if you would call this interception fraud. Living in Florida at Christmas time, I love this term, never heard it before, porch pirates. Did you ever hear that?
Yeah. That's not interception fraud. It's I guess a similar concept. Now, porch pirates happen everywhere, unfortunately. That's simply, someone just walking around the neighborhood looking for goods. And we've all seen those videos of, some guy struggling to fit a TV in his car that's, UPS delivered to somebody's door.
Yes, exactly.
So that's a different, porch theft is not deliberate, meaning these are just, people that are, I can't give the motivations behind it, but it's simply people roaming around neighborhoods. They don't know what they're getting. So they'll open up, could be they're going to get, Metamucil pills because somebody ran low, or they could get, a horrible dress that would never fit them. They don't know what they're getting. Interception fraud is very different because interception fraud is where fraudsters are targeting specific items that they know that they can resell. So what they'll do is they'll go onto the dark web, they'll buy credit cards or obtain credit cards in any way that has the appropriate, the associated billing address. So the order will look like a perfect order because the billing address will match the shipping address. The billing address matches what the company has on file, and they're shipping the product to the address of the cardholder. So from the merchant's perspective, this looks like a very good order. I know the credit card company told me and they confirmed that this is the right billing address. So the fraudster needs to get a hold of the product. So what do? They call up UPS or FedEx and they make up a story and they'll say, I moved. They'll try to sweet talk their way into getting the shipper to allow them to reroute the package. And the shipper will allow you to send the package somewhere completely different, which is either a warehouse or the fraudster's home or some sort of drop site that this fraudster can easily pick up the goods and walk away.
Oh, God, so sophisticated. It's becoming so sophisticated. I would think, why doesn't UPS say, well, wait a minute, that's not where because then there's liability, I would think, on the part of the company that's changing, the delivery company that's changing the address from the original address. There might be liability there.
So you do have a point, and that is something that the business owner controls. So to stop this type of fraud, the business owner needs to simply say, UPS and FedEx, I do not allow any changes. You need to ship it to the destination address that was on the order. Don't reroute the package. If they have that filter on and they start rerouting packages, then they'll be liable. But until then, it's up to the business owner to ensure that their shipper does not allow any package reroutes for this exact reason.
Gotcha. Okay, now tell me a little bit about what card testing fraud is.
So card testing fraud typically happens on sites where there is a product that is cheap or essentially inexpensive. So when there's a data breach, someone gets a list of cards, and they want to make sure that the card is hot, meaning the card is active and there's credit on it and they can go shopping. So what they do is they'll run a bunch of cards through an unsuspecting website, and they'll buy a product for $1, $5, $3. All they're doing is they're trying to figure out if the card is active, if somebody, the card owner has already figured out that the card has been compromised and it's closed. So we see this often with charity sites because you can give a donation of just a couple of dollars. But we've also seen this on random sites, and there's no rhyme or reason why one site would be a victim or not. It's just victims just pick the site, maybe they advertise somewhere, and then just the orders just keep coming, and they have a lot of trouble stopping it.
All right.
So that's also it's easy to figure out that they're the fraudsters because they'll usually use the same IP or they'll use the same billing and shipping. It's generally a bot that keeps coming, but it's just hard to get it to go away.
Sometimes I think it would have been better off if we didn't have computers. I mean, I know computers are great in terms of education and learning, but because of all the stuff happening and a lot of it happening on the internet, and there's no way to stop it, we're all still paying the price for what for what the criminals are doing. And again, you know a lot about the computer end of it, whereas most people probably don't. So I'm glad that you're explaining it. Now, another one you have listed here is account takeover fraud. Now, that's when the fraudsters get a hold of everything?
So I'll explain to you what account takeover fraud is. And I actually was a victim of that. So it was really interesting as a fraud prevention, somebody that's in the industry, to see what the fraudsters did. So it just also just to hold one thought. Going back to your previous comments on it's not worth it having computers. Computers obviously and technology has evolved, and it's really allowed us to do so many incredible things. We just need every company just needs to protect themselves appropriately. And when you do, and you use a company like No Fraud, then you can transact e-commerce without a problem. So it's there are all these risks, but like anything else, you just need to take proper precautions to protect yourself. So back to account. Sorry, Ed. Go ahead.
That's what I was going to say. I got you. So what your company does is they actually work with different merchants or different stores to protect them from this type of fraud happening to them.
Exactly. So we monitor their sites and we screen their transactions, and we'll let the company know this is not a good order. This is a fraudster that's trying to cheat and steal from you. So that's what our service does.
Okay. All right, good. All right, so I'll let you continue on with the account takeover.
Sure. So account takeover fraud, as I mentioned before, there have been so many data breaches, and sometimes the data that's stolen is not credit card data, but it's the combination of the username and password, and it's really up to the individual or the consumer to make sure that the usernames and passwords are not identical. So, meaning I'll use my email address as the username, and I'll use the same password for many of the stores that I shop in. Ever since I was a victim of account takeover fraud, I changed all of this. But what the fraudsters do is they'll take a combination of a username and password that they were able to collect during a data breach, and they'll, with a bot, go to popular websites that they know everyone has an account on, or many people have an account with, and they'll just try the username and password and just keep trying the different combinations that they lifted from the data breach. So in my story, I had an account at Walmart, and one day I got an email to say, oh, your product, here's your order for it was things like a $600 laptop. And I'm like, I definitely didn't buy that. So I went into my account, and I was able to see that the fraudster had gone into my account. They tried using my stored credit card information, and they tried shipping a product. In this case, it was somewhere in the eastern part of the United States. I forgot which state it was, but they tried to ship a laptop to somewhere else. Walmart had good enough fraud prevention, and they were able to cancel the order on their own. So they were able to they were able to essentially stop it before it happened. So the order was created, but the order was canceled fairly quickly. And the way they were able to get in is they had my credentials. They had my username and password combination.
And what's interesting, well, probably about 10 years ago, I did the CBS affiliate down here TV show. We did a segment on how accessible is your Facebook. And so when you talk about the password, most people use, I think the top thing most people use for their password is their pet's name. And so I'm assuming that fraudsters, while they're dealing with credit cards, people who have open Facebook accounts are allowing the entire world to look and see everything, as opposed to closing that account where no one, it's only for your friends that can see. So that might help. Now we're going to do another quick break. We come back. We still got a couple more to cover. I got lots of questions for you. So stay with us. Back in a moment.
Sure.
Consumers, do you have bad credit? Can't purchase a house or car? Paying too much in interest on your credit cards and loans? Scammed by credit repair companies? There is hope. You can get back on track and do it the right way. Call Credit Education Consultants today at 813-500-6064. That's 813-500-6064. Or go to crediteducationconsultants.com now and get the help you need. Don't delay. Call today. Mortgage reps and realtor inquiries are also welcomed.
And we're back on AM/FM 24/7, Fraudsters Radio with Shoshanah Posner from nofraud.com. Let's continue on the list here. Fraud via identity theft. Well, I can tell you that happens. It's still happening 9 years later to me. I get such bizarre phone calls from whoever took my purse. Somebody tried to add themselves onto my insurance for my car, believe it or not. How does that work with the credit cards?
So fraud by identity theft is where a fraudster gets a hold of all of your personal information, so Social Security, birth date, and they're able to go to the banks and they'll sign up for credit cards in your name and using your Social Security number. They have the cards, and then they'll go to town using the credit that they obtained fraudulently on your name. Okay.
And then you also have one more, chargeback fraud. Now, I read up a little bit on this. I know that, for example, in my case, if I had a credit card that was compromised, I see stuff on there, maybe that wasn't mine. Normally when I call up, they don't just take it off because I've already have done an ID theft affidavit, years ago. But the chargeback fraud, it sounds like the actual consumer is planning to call up and say, hey, I didn't do that, and then they get a new card, and they don't have to pay for the item, correct?
Yeah, so this is where somebody that knowingly purchases a product and they decide either they don't like it or, or they're just, hey, I want to get a free product. So they'll call their credit card company and they'll say, this wasn't me, it's fraud, or sometimes they'll say, oh, the credit card company, the online business is a fraud because they told me it's going to be ready and I'll get my product in 7 days and it was 8 days. So they'll submit a chargeback where really it wasn't fraud. It was either poor customer service or nothing at all, or it's simply a person that's just doing something that's not legal, not legit, not ethical, and claiming that someone used their card and did not have authorization to do so. So in this case, we call it friendly fraud, where it still affects merchants because they still get the chargeback and they have to fight it. But it isn't actual true fraud because the credit card owner is the person that made the order as opposed to a fraudster.
So it almost seems like you can't win. Years ago, I had a store. I was very lucky. Believe it or not, I did not have a single chargeback. I just did it for 6 months. It was a test. I decided to cut it. But I consider myself really lucky in that I never got hit for any chargebacks. Now, when I'm looking at your website, you have a bunch of things in boxes, and I went, well, I've got to ask Shoshanah about all these things now. And so we have about 10 minutes left. But you write up the technology, things like device identification, geolocation, proxy piercing, retroactive monitoring. Can you explain what some of those things are and how they work to help stop the fraud and how you're, because this obviously cities should be using. I don't know if you have any competition or not. I've never heard of a company that does something like this, but I do think it's a brilliant thing that you're doing, because you're actually stopping these people from getting hit for, thousands, hundreds, millions of dollars, whatever it is, which saves all the rest of us from having to pay into that. So maybe talk a little bit about the technology, and then also, talk about how can a regular consumer recognize it? For example, I'm a credit consultant, so I know if something's on the credit report, but maybe some of the signs that somebody's been victimized, whether it's a person or a business.
Sure. So no-fraud uses a combination of machine learning and human intelligence to identify a transaction's legitimacy. So you mentioned some of the different technology, and I'll go through them pretty quickly. So device identification. Every device that's connected to the internet has an ID. So we're able to tell if that device has previously committed any fraudulent activity. That increases the likelihood that the subsequent transactions are riskier. Proxy piercing. We're able to tell if an internet connection is using a proxy, meaning someone's trying to mask their ID, or if it's a work proxy, we'll know that if it's a proxy used for work, which is less risky. We're able to tell the geolocation. Where is the shopper and where's the product going to? We're able to, look at velocity. How often do we see orders coming from, a person's either name or going to a certain place? That typically is associated with a high risk of fraud. So, we use, some of this technology that we're talking about, and a host more. We use, global blacklists and our own data as well to be able to identify patterns in a merchant's purchases. And we're able to tell them this is a legitimate transaction. You could process it without worry. Or this is, this transaction is a high risk of fraud that we could recommend that you cancel the order because there's a high likelihood that this transaction will result in a fraud chargeback. One thing that we do offer to customers is we are so confident in our product that if they do get a fraud chargeback, we'll actually reimburse the customer and give them their money back. So the customer is confident that we're doing what we should be doing and we have a high level of accuracy.
So when you're doing this, just so I understand a little bit better, you're having people that manually review the transactions, but does a computer also, both? Is it both that are reviewing transactions?
So in 99.5% of cases, the no-fraud solution will give a pass or a fail. In about 0.5% of cases, we'll see transactions that have high-risk indicators, yet there is a way to validate the order. So in these cases, we have an internal team of analysts, and that's all they do all day is screen transactions for fraud. They're very good at what they do. They understand what fraud looks like, and they will review those transactions that are not easily identifiable as legitimate or fraudulent.
I gotcha. Okay, it sounds pretty interesting to me because, like I said before, are there other companies that do what you do, or are you pretty much the company?
We do have competition. I'd love to say we don't, but we do. And there's a very big demand for this type of service. So there are a couple of companies like us. We do pride ourselves on being the most accurate and approving the most amount of orders because of our strong technology.
So when you look for customers, I'm going to say with what you order, I would think customers would be like coming to you in droves, saying, I don't want to get ripped off anymore, because I know if I still had a store where I was doing that and I was getting a lot of chargebacks, I'd be kind of nervous because that's money that's coming out of my pocket if I'm doing e-commerce. So, I mean, that's just my thought is people need a way to mitigate their risk factors and not pay out. And I'm also going to guess here that this probably happens more to merchants who are like you were talking before in electronics, or more in high-end sales. Is that true, more so than like low-end little sales?
You'd be surprised. We have companies that sell $20 products, makeup. We have people that sell, waist trainers. We have apparel, T-shirts. There is fraud in every industry. I wish I could say it's just electronics. I think that's where it started because you get the biggest bang for your buck. But at this point, the fraudsters will target any company that's vulnerable that sells a product that can be resold.
I gotcha. Because you're when I read through your site, I'm like, this is much more than like you put it in layman's terms, but it's like I say, it's a lot of fraud. It's just a tremendous amount of fraud. Are there any other tips that maybe you want to give to our listeners?
Sure. If you're a consumer, you definitely want to look at your statement and make sure that you've created all, you're the one that's purchased and made all those charges. As a consumer as well, you want to make sure that your usernames and passwords aren't the same for every account, every store that you shop with, because if there is a data breach, you could be you can easily be affected by account takeover fraud. And as a business, if you sell product online, this is definitely something that you should consider, and not simply rely on your payment gateway filters, which are very clunky and aren't very efficient. And definitely look into using a service like No Fraud to allow you to ship orders with confidence without the fear of fraud.
Okay, I got you. And would you like to give out your information? How can people reach you? Website, phone number, email, whatever you'd like to give out.
Sure. So my phone number is 888-773-3669. I can be reached at extension 104. My name is Shoshanah Posner, and my email address is shoshana@nofraud.com. That's SHOSHANAH @nofraud.com. That's NOFRAUD.com.
Great. I want to thank you very much for being on the show. You explained a lot. Hopefully our listeners out there, and especially the business owners, will get a lot of information from this. And I certainly hope that you do get a lot of calls for your business, because I think what you're doing is really fantastic. It's fighting all of these people, and you got to be the underdog. So thank you very much for being on the show today.
And thank you for inviting me.
You're very welcome. We'll have to have you on again. And let's thank our listeners today. Thank you for joining us on Fraudsters Radio. You can join us again next Monday from 1 to 2 p.m. Eastern Time live. Remember, we want to hear your stories, so you can contact us through the Fraudsters Radio Facebook page. Thank you.